we have this real misconception that desire works the same way for everybody.
Do we idolise relationships to an unhealthy level?
You can actually have a very active sex life with no intimacy. The majority of women don't have a low libido. We're just looking at sexual desire through the male lens.
At what point do you know, actually, we're so mismatched in what we want?
We have this idea that if you choose the right partner, it's all going to fall into place. No, love is a verb.
Welcome to Life, Love and the Law, a podcast by Stowe Family Law. My name's Liza Gatrell, and today I'm joined by Natasha Silverman, who is a specialist relationship and sex therapist and a psychotherapeutic coach. And we are going to be talking about sexless marriages. So, Natasha, firstly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to start by introducing yourself and letting us know what it is that you do day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a relationship and psychosexual therapist, aka sex therapist. I am a coach, a speaker, and I've trained hundreds of frontline practitioners in how to work with couples who are at breaking point in their relationship.
It's a really interesting job. How did you get into it?
Well, funnily enough, it was a bit of a strange career trajectory for me, really. My background is in law. I studied law, graduated with a first, fully intended to go to law school as I had a full academic scholarship to train as a solicitor. And I had a lot of health issues at that time. And I realised that the relationships that I had around me were making a considerable difference in terms of my experience of that time. And I started to become really interested in the way that relationships help us, also hurt us. And at the same time, I was having my own romantic relationships during which, I was seeing myself overfunction like many women do. And my interest in this area just started to grow, and it was a natural progression. And now really the core of what I do is about helping couples to create relationships that help them rather than hurt them.
It's really, really interesting. So the topic of the episode is sexless marriage.
Yes.
I suppose let's start at the beginning. Like, what would you classify as a sexless marriage?
Okay, so a sexless marriage is defined as, this is the rough sort of understanding, it does vary, but a couple that has sex less than 10 times a year would be classified as having a sexless relationship. But as a sex and relationship therapist, my concern is predominantly, it's not about frequency, it's about distress and the meaning that the couple make of this lack of sex.
Obviously, you're working with couples really regularly. Are there kind of themes as to how people find themselves in this kind of situation?
Yeah, there are. And while every couple has their own very unique story, there are definitely some trends that I see. Often one partner will come in and say, we have not had sex for weeks, months, years. I don't think I can live like this for much longer. I feel rejected. I feel undesired. I feel unseen. And it's really, really hurting me. I can't live like this. And the other partner will often look at them and say, how on earth are you talking about sex? How are you talking about sex when we are so emotionally disconnected? We rarely get time together. We are working flat out. Maybe we have kids. I've had a rough time at work lately, maybe a family bereavement. There's so much going on. How are you talking about sex? And that is a very common presentation.
Yeah. And quite a difficult conversation for people to have. Is this why they end up coming to see you, because they struggle to have this conversation between themselves at home?
Yes, absolutely. And this is where couples start to get stuck because mismatched desire and periods of sexlessness are incredibly common in relationships. That's just the nature of a long-term relationship. Stuff happens, you're less in touch with your ability to be intimate. That's pretty expected. The question is, what do you do when that happens? How do you handle it? Because some couples can go through a period of sexlessness and get their relationship back on track and their intimacy back on track when the time is right and when that stressor has passed, no problem. But other couples will go through that period and there will be so much pressure and tension and conflict and guilt and a sense of duty that they're not living up to, that even when the timing is better, that they're now so far apart. So it's about how you manage that time.
And so when they are so far apart, kind of what are the things that they need to really be thinking about to try and come back together?
The first thing is understanding that your desire might work very, very differently to your partner's. We have this real misconception that desire works the same way for everybody. You know, we get a terrible sex education. We're lucky if we're given the opportunity to put a condom on a banana. You know, that's the height of sex education, certainly when I was at school. So then we learn from Hollywood or porn when everybody wants sex quite urgently. It works quite quickly. And everybody wants sex at the same time. You know, it's miraculously, everyone's always in the mood for sex at the same time. And there is this expectation that if you're in a relationship that is working and you love your partner, then you will be available for sex when they initiate. The trouble is that the majority of men, so around 80 to 90% of men, have spontaneous sexual desire. That's that light switch on experience. They also often assume their partner has that. But we know that only 10 to 20% of women have that spontaneous desire, where it just falls out of the sky from nowhere. And actually, women have something called responsive desire. And that's the erotic cue triggering their desire. So women have to generally experience arousal first before they have the thought of sex.
Okay.
So if you're waiting for your female partner to be in the mood, you might be waiting a very long time. You know, it has to be cultivated and nurtured. And this is often where couples get really stuck.
Yeah. And so ultimately then that could start in the morning. Like if you want to have sex in the evening, the things that you do actually throughout the day could majorly impact on your partner's want, if you like, to be intimate in the evening.
Absolutely. And it is something that has to be handled with care because it's very easy to fall into these patterns of pressure. If you do expect your partner to line up with you sexually, we're not too far away from tapping into duty and expectation. And this is often, you know, how couples present in the therapy room as well. It's, I feel that I'm letting my partner down. And the partner will often say, yeah, we're married or we're in a relationship and we're not doing it. What is going on? And I don't know about you, but I personally don't find duty and expectation and obligation that much of a turn on. So you can see again how couples are getting quite stuck.
And I suppose the longer that you sit in that space as well, where perhaps one party's feeling that they just need to do it out of duty and the other party, you know, they have a much higher sex drive. The longer then that goes on, the more issues that are kind of brewing under the surface.
Yeah, definitely. And something I see regularly is it's partners having sex when actually they don't really want to be doing it. This is a real problem. The normalisation of coercive sex is something that I see constantly, particularly in heterosexual relationships where the female partner has a lower desire on the face of it, but is actually generally responsive and their partner just doesn't know how to tap into that. Women will tell me quite regularly, it's easier to just do it because he's going to be in a bad mood, he'll feel hurt, he's going to feel rejected, we've got a day out with the kids tomorrow and he's going to be in a bad mood. So sometimes I just do it to get it over with and I don't want to. And if that is a part of your relationship, I can see why later down the road it's ended up as a sexless relationship.
How do we put it back from that?
So there needs to be an acceptance that that's what's happened and that's where you've been. You know, I find it's really healing for the person who's actually possibly been having some kind of non-consensual sex through pressure and coercion to hear their partner say, oh my God, yeah, I can see I've been doing that. I did not have the tools. We haven't been taught this. I do not want this to happen again. I regret that and I'm so sorry. Let's figure out how to do this differently. Because I think most partners don't realise that they're the strategies they're employing and the impact that that's having. And sex therapy very much helps couples to just sweep away all the history, all the debris and start again. And often that begins with, believe it or not, a sex ban.
Okay.
We put couples on a sex ban and we help them rebuild a sex life that actually works for them. And that might be starting with affection. I know lots of partners will say, the only time my partner shows me any affection is if they want to have sex with me. Otherwise, I'm just invisible. There's no emotional support. He doesn't ask me how my day is. But if he's in the mood to have sex, then suddenly I exist. And that can be really hurtful. So we have to get on top of all of that.
That's really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
When couples come to you for therapy, is there an element then of having to do individual therapy with them sometimes if they're in completely different places? Because you were saying, they need to understand that actually that is how they're making their partner feel as well to a certain extent. So is that done individually or is it all joint?
Yeah, so I like to combine individual sessions with both partners and couple work. And that allows me to get a really good read on what's been happening, what's currently going on, and the subjects that are hard for the partners to bring up together. And from there, I'm able to start providing some psychoeducation, having more difficult conversations so that when they come back together, it feels more reparative.
And when couples are coming to you for therapy, I'm just interested, looking at it from a heterosexual couple, is it often the party that is wanting more sex or the one that is kind of a bit more reticent to it that is instigating the therapy?
So when it comes to sex, it's often the pursuer. So it's the higher desire partner, I find. And I'm very aware that I might work with a particular kind of couple, so it could be different for other therapists. But personally, I see that the partner who wants more sex is the one that's bringing their partner in, saying, help me, I can't live like this. But often that is a gateway to much deeper emotional work because, you can actually have a very active sex life with no intimacy whatsoever. I work with couples who are having sex multiple times a week and they're getting very little out of it. They feel completely disconnected. They don't feel loved or seen. It feels transactional or mechanical. And so we can't define intimacy by frequency. It just makes absolutely no sense.
And when we're talking about intimacy then, that can actually be a precursor to a more healthy sex life. What is it that's lacking there with the intimate? Is it the hand holding? Is it the general touching? Is it kisses? Is it just that it's got to be fed in throughout the day and throughout your relationship rather than it just being kind of like almost too organised? Like we're going to go on a date night. So this is going to be our night where there's going to be lots of intimacy. But actually throughout the week, we're just going to be like ships passing in the night and we're not going to speak to each other.
Yeah, that's such a good point about date night. If I had £1 for every couple that has come into therapy after date night or a sexy weekend away and it's all ended in tears, it's just speaking to the pressure element that desire needs space to breathe. Which is why scheduled sex, date nights, weekends away, it can be a recipe for disaster. And in terms of how you build intimacy in, it depends on what a couple is going through. I often hear from couples who are dealing with a lot of avoidance from one partner. So one partner in particular might be really unable to be empathetic, to connect emotionally, to listen, to be really present, to provide affection or closeness. And that is a lonely place to be. And if you have somebody who is very avoidant in that way, it's not unusual for sex to be the attachment strategy. Sex can often give the illusion of real intimacy without the true vulnerability that emotional intimacy offers. And so that can often be where their cup is filled. Sometimes it becomes a case of, what's going on here? What are these old patterns you've learned that shuts down your ability to be with your partner in a way that isn't sexual?
Within let's say somebody's in a sexless marriage at the moment, how long do people sit in these spaces? I'm imagining from what you're saying that you could be sitting in it for a number of years potentially before that, one or other partner kind of says, look, we need to, it's make or break. We need to resolve this and sort it out. Why do people sit there as long as they do?
I think often there's this real hope that it's situational. We're going through a tough time right now. The kids are at a difficult age. Work's been particularly full on. Maybe there's this hope that maybe it will pass, particularly if your sex life was actually quite good at the beginning. Now, we know that women and men, so this is quite a heteronormative example, but sex drives are far more aligned between 6 months to 24 months into a relationship, the honeymoon phase. What then happens is women then move into that responsive place where sexual desire is a bit harder to access. It's there, but it needs some work. what that means is there's this experience of loss. Where did it go? We had it and now it's gone. What's changed? Is it how they feel about me? Is it hormones? Is it health issue? What is it? But if the majority of women are experiencing this, the majority of women don't have a low libido. We're just looking at sexual desire through the male lens. So I think there is this period of time that couples spend waiting and hoping that they'll just get back to that. And sometimes they do. But if they haven't had the tools to handle it very well, and they've heaped on pressure and guilt and shame and failure, good luck doing that on your own. It's a really difficult place to get to.
And, we talk about the honeymoon period a lot in relationships, don't we?
Yeah.
But the reality is that if we're going to have a long-standing relationship that's going to go on for years and years, that relationship will develop and it will change, and that there will be ebbs and flows of all sorts of different parts of that relationship. And I suppose, do we pin too much on that honeymoon period right at the beginning because of Instagram, social media, movies, the meet cute and, how wonderful all of these things are, that I suppose what I'm getting at is, do we idolize relationships to an unhealthy level that actually the reality of it can never meet up to what our expectations are?
Yeah, I think there's certainly something in that. Why wouldn't you love the honeymoon phase? There's the novelty, the curiosity, the unknown. It's actually often safety and security that can really kill your sex drive. Let's be honest. Love and security are fantastic, but it doesn't necessarily go brilliantly with sexual desire. So it makes sense that people would miss that and want to recreate that. But the reality is that it's not always going to feel like the honeymoon period. If you have the right tools, and you can try and recreate aspects of that. But you do know this person now. You do know what pajamas they're going to wear. You do know they're going to leave their socks on the floor, when they get in the shower. It's very hard to unsee what you see once you're settling into this routine and this life with them. And we do have to accept and possibly grieve some of that. Does that mean your sex life is going to be dull and boring forever? Not at all. And I see this in therapy every day. Couples who've been together for so long, rediscovering each other, their sense of curiosity and novelty. But you do know this person and it won't feel the same way. And different chemicals and hormones are being produced than in the honeymoon phase.
I mean, what I'm hearing as well is you have to put some work into it.
Yes.
We can't just expect it to be easy and, something that will just naturally happen and just, that we don't have to think about. It's something that actually requires thought. It requires talking. It requires effort really being put into it to make it work.
Yeah, and that is not a popular opinion. Let me tell you that. People do not like to hear that this takes work. We want relationships to be easy. We have this idea that if you choose the right partner, it's all going to fall into place and, it's all going to run smoothly. No, love is a verb and it's something that you have to do. And intimacy and love are things you can learn to do better and more effectively.
Do you find, and I mean, I'm not suggesting necessarily that the couples that come to therapy with you would have gone down this route, but do you find that sometimes when parties, or could it be possible that when parties are in a sexless relationship, that can also lead to adultery, I suppose, because they're then seeking externally something that they feel like they're missing from within their relationship? Yeah,
I see that quite frequently. Maybe it's a friend or a colleague or sex workers. This happens a lot. Sex is pleasurable. There's nothing wrong with desiring sex. But there is a point at which it becomes highly, highly damaging, if not abusive, to a partner. And a lot of damage control has to be done when that discovery is made or if it is declared. But look, there are plenty of people in sexless relationships who are not breaking their relationship contract and having affairs. So while it makes a lot of sense that some people have to find strategies to manage that sense of being undesired or unloved or unseen, as you can imagine, it creates a lot more work for a couple in order for them to heal.
And I mean, it's really positive that you have couples that are coming to therapy and that they're talking these things through. I suppose what worries me is the number of couples that are out there that either one or both of them don't want to go to therapy, or, that there's still a bit of a taboo sometimes about any type of therapy. But I suppose sex therapy as well can sometimes perhaps, be a little bit scary. What would you say to somebody that wanted to raise it with their partner? How should they broach that? What's the best way of doing it?
That's such a good question. I think it's really important to say, first of all, ground yourself in the knowledge that there is no perfect relationship. Relationships are hard. You're right that there are so many sexless relationships. It's not that this person would be alone in that experience. You know, your next door neighbour's probably dealing with something similar if you look at the stats. So being sure to share your feelings with a partner in a way that doesn't create a sense of failure for your partner is really annoying. You know, I'm going to assume that the person bringing it up is the higher desire partner, because often the lower desire partner is just, you know, the MO is, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Don't go there. Don't raise it. And so actually leaning into a difficult conversation, it can feel like a bomb waiting to go off. So lead with I statements. Let your partner know how you feel. Not that they are making you feel that way, but, you know, the lack of intimacy makes me feel distant from you and disconnected from you. And you can state your wish. Every criticism is an unmet wish, after all. So it would mean a lot to me if, when you're ready, we could have a chat about how we might start to rebuild intimacy, even if it's not sexual to start with.
And for people that might be in this situation, at what point do you know this is definitely something we can work on and we can definitely come out the other end, as opposed to actually we're so mismatched in what we want that this isn't something we're going to be able to come back for? That feels like a really tight seesaw as to when that point would be. What advice would you give to somebody that was thinking about, you know, is this actually the end of the relationship?
Yeah. Ending a relationship based on a dramatic mismatch is an interesting concept, because it really depends on why. So what I often see in therapy is that as the higher desire partner's attachment needs are met in other ways, because we have a sex ban and we're encouraging non-sexual touch and communication and all of the things that perhaps the higher desire partner wasn't able to directly ask for, what we see is that their sex drive comes down. What then happens is the lower desire partner, sensing that their partner is easing off a little bit, has a bit more room to think, do I want this for me? It's not about them anymore. You know, it's
pressure's gone.
The pressure's gone. We've given the desire space to grow, and it's very hard for lower desire partners, who are often women in heterosexual relationships, to get that space to wonder, what do I want for me? So, you know, ultimately, the mismatch doesn't have to be as great as it seems with the right support. That said, for couples who aren't able to face therapy, it might just feel too heavy, too hard, too complicated. Some couples do decide to cut their losses.
And I'm sure there is a worry amongst people that have decided to end their relationship, that this might be something that they then need to talk about when they come and see a divorce lawyer. You know, what are the reasons for the breakdown of the marriage? Do I need to go into this in huge amounts of detail? And the reality of that is that you don't anymore. So we very much used to have a system where, in order to be able to issue divorce proceedings, you either had to wait 2 years or you had to provide a reason. So there had to be adultery or unreasonable behaviour. And to be able to draft an unreasonable behaviour petition, you used to have to give sort of 3 or 4 examples of how the other party has behaved that has led to the breakdown of the marriage. But what we now have is the no-fault divorce, which is great, because what that means is that actually this can remain really private. This isn't something that you need to tell anybody about. It's not something that you feel needs to go into any of the paperwork in relation to the divorce proceedings. So, you know, it's a much better system that we have these days.
Brilliant.
For somebody then that's gone through divorce proceedings or has gone through a separation, and perhaps being within a sexless marriage was one of the reasons why their marriage or their relationship broke down, there must then be worries about, well, am I taking some of this into my new relationships? You know, am I just going to find myself in the same position in sort of 5-10 years' time? And whether, I suppose, that's the person that was initiating and feeling that those needs weren't being met, or whether it was the other person. Do people go through counselling with you as single people in the same way?
Yes. So I work with couples, individuals, singles. You know, the breakdown of a relationship, or months or years of pain in a relationship that wasn't working, it can leave you feeling really wounded and bruised and hurt, and actually having the space to understand that and unpack that and reorganize it and help it make sense is really important, particularly if you're holding on to a story about sex. If you've walked away from this relationship, or if the relationship has ended and you've left thinking, there's something wrong with me. I didn't want sex enough. I wasn't what they needed sexually. What is wrong with me? Is there something about me that needs to be fixed? Therapy can be a brilliant place to work through that and understand that. And similarly, if you're the partner who felt chronically rejected and hurt and like your needs were unmet, that's agony too. So figuring out what was going on there is really important. There is no objective reality in a relationship. It just doesn't exist. And couples will fight it out and they'll fight for their story. I'm not the problem. It's you because, even if you win that argument, your relationship is losing. So what's the point? So, coming to therapy and actually being able to make sense of that and take away some of the guilt and the shame and the worry can be really healing.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It's been really, really interesting. And I know there will be lots of things for people to take away from the conversation. I think it's actually a really important conversation to have. For anyone that's listening, what would be your top piece of advice, if you like, if they are currently finding themselves in a sexless marriage?
Yeah. Okay. So remembering that there is nothing wrong with you for desiring sex or for not wanting sex in a relationship that doesn't feel emotionally safe or makes you feel alone. There's nothing wrong with you. Speak to somebody, whether it's a friend, a professional. The silence really fuels the shame and the isolation. So talk to somebody about it and you're likely to find that you're not alone. But if your partner does suggest therapy, go the first time. Even if they throw it out in an argument when you are, shouting at each other or having a really difficult conversation, even if they don't mention it again tomorrow, people don't tend to say, we need professional help unless this is something that's really hurting them.
It's a big step to take, isn't it?
It's
not a throwaway comment. Perfect. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
If you want to find out more about the work that Natasha Silverman does, you can go to her website, natashasilverman.com, or Instagram @TashTalksTherapy.